The reading is from the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all, as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the good will of all the people. And day by day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. All who believed were together and had all things in common. In the fall of 2010, I had the opportunity to take a sabbatical, and I spent that 3-month sabbatical at Tantura Ecumenical Institute in Jerusalem. Tantura is about as far east in Jerusalem as you can get before hitting the wall at the Bethlehem checkpoint. One of the things we hold in common is worship. We worship the one God, maybe in different ways, in different places, at different times. But we hold worship and prayer central to our very being. Early that September of 2010, the 15 plus participants in this sabbatical program were taking part in worship just prior to dinner. As the service was coming to a conclusion, the director of Tantur commented that this is a strange land where we as Christians come together to worship. And in our worship, hear the Muslim call to prayer. And know that at this hour of sundown, that the Rosh Hashanah celebrated by the Jews is beginning. A land and people that our common scriptures tell us is based on hospitality and compassion for one another. Yet it is a land and people who have been fraught with dissension and separation for years. A land and people void of peace and trust. How will these images presented in our scripture passages come to life?
There are 2 men, one Israeli and one Palestinian. The Israeli's daughter was killed by a Palestinian suicide bomber. The Palestinian son was killed by an Israeli soldier. When the deaths occurred, they hated and feared each other's people. And as they told us their stories, they cried on each other's shoulders and called each other brother. They hold in common their grief and death that changed their lives forever. How can grief and death be a catalyst for new life and hope? A Palestinian man who is 3rd generation in a refugee camp spoke about his hope for the future by saying that he works for peace and builds bridges with Israelis, knowing that he will be labeled as a collaborator by his people, and that he will not live to see change. He does what he does so that his grandchildren and great-grandchildren might see change. So how do we hang on to hope for the future in the midst of present realities?
There was a particularly touching experience for me. One evening, one of the women and I walked from Tantour through the Bethlehem checkpoint and made our way to Manger Square. It was a beautiful evening and we wanted to see the Advent lights. In Manger Square, we stopped for a coffee and sat out on the patio and people watched. There was a group of young people kicking around a soccer ball. As they laughed and played together, I couldn't help but think that there was probably another group of youngsters on the other side of the wall doing the same thing. Now, wouldn't it be great if we could get those groups together to play with each other and see what would come from there? How can children be instruments of change now and for the future?